Welcome to SCL, the Subject, Composition and Light Photography Podcast. Welcome to SCL, the Subject, Composition and Light Photography Podcast, Episode 8 for the 11th of August 2008. Hi everybody, hope you've had a good week, taking lots of photographs. I know this week I've got out and taken a few more than I normally do, which is nice. But my son Oliver's off school at the moment for the summer holidays in England, so we've been spending a lot of time going out playing footy down the park and things like that, and luckily my leg is sort of holding up, my hamstring hasn't popped again like it did a few weeks ago. Alright, my name's Rob from www.robnonphoto.com. I'm a beginner amateur photographer, and the podcast and the website are all about me showing you my pictures and then sort of sharing sort of the things I learn as I go along, with the idea that maybe you can pick some things up and maybe learn from them too. But it's all about a two-way process as well. So obviously there's the comment forms on the website where you can make comments and feedback, but we've also got a Flickr group. If you go to flickr.com and go through the groups and look for Rob Nunn Photo, we've got a nice little discussion forum where you can post your own images and you can take part in technique challenges and assignments, and the idea of those is to sort of practice some of the basics of photography to improve our overall skills. If you want to email me, I'm scalespeeder@gmail.com, and I'm scalespeeder on Flickr as well, and DeviantArt as well, and lots of other places. If you do a Google search for Scalespeeder, you'll come up with that's SCALESPEEDER. You'll probably find things like YouTube videos and all that sort of stuff. Right, so what have I been doing in the last week or so? Although Oliver's been off school, I've had the opportunity to get up early a couple of mornings and take some nice shots. I did a nice early morning walk around Fort Brookhurst. I actually did the photo walk more than a week ago, and I did it at the same time when I took the set of pictures with my Minolta film camera, but I had my Fujifilm S5700 with me at the same time, and so I hadn't bothered processing them, so it was really nice to go through those pictures and have a look. And it was a beautiful morning. It wasn't really early. I think it was about 7 o'clock. So that the sun was above the horizon, but the water in the moat around the fort was really flat. I mean, if you look at some of the pictures, it's almost like a mirror. And the wildlife, the ducks and the swans, were sort of just a little bit lethargic and feeding. Some of them were still asleep, so it was nice to get some shots of that as well. And I'm on sort of a bit of a sepia fix at the moment with a lot of the pictures. I always try and do a black and white conversion at the end in Elements of Photoshop, and then, excuse me, I can't resist adding a bit of a sepia tone. I don't know, I'll probably go out of it soon, I'm not sure. I did another early morning walk down at Priddy's Hard, which is sort of the back of Portsmouth Harbour, where there's lots of yachts and old destroyers, and one of my favourite subjects is there's an old big assault ship there. It's either HMS Fearless or Intrepid, I'm not sure which one it is, and I always like trying to get decent pictures of that, but especially the destroyers as well, because there's 3 down there at the moment, Type 42s, waiting, scrapping or selling, but they're quite a long way away, and it's hard to get a decent angle on them, so I tried to have a go at that. But again, because it was early in the morning, the water was nice and flat, so that was good, and the light was really soft, but I'll be talking about that in a minute. I got some toys for my SRT 101 Minolta film camera. As you probably know, if you've listened to the last podcast a couple of weeks ago, I bought a Minolta SRT 101 film camera from a car boot for a tenner, and it came with a 50mm prime lens on it. And 50mm is a great size for any SLR, because it's the same aspect ratio of what we see with our eyes, so pictures tend to look really natural. But obviously the problem with a fixed lens is there's no zoom, and so if you want a real wide angle, you've got to walk backwards, and if you want a real close up, you've got to walk forwards, which is great. but there may be times where you can't. And I was lucky enough to see a MC Rockor lens, 135mm telephoto on eBay. So this is like a 2 and a bit zoom, I guess you call it, but it's not a zoom. You know, you've put the lens on and that's it. You're in close. And I was scratching my head a bit about how to use it, but Commander Data sent me made a nice comment on the blog, you know, and he said, although you sometimes may think that a telephoto is best for things like portraits, because it sort of compresses the image a little bit, it can also be great for landscapes, for the situation where you can't get that close, or you want that effect of compressing the perspective. So I thought, yes, that's cool, so I'm going to be using that. Just got to keep my eyes out now for a wide angle, maybe a 25mm or something like that. But the MC Rockor lenses don't come up that often on eBay, and I haven't seen that many. But I've done a bit of research, and I think it's the lens mount is compatible with some of the later, I think it's MD range of lenses. But I won't bore you with that. I'll look at that. I've spent the last few days working on a few posts for the course, which is the sort of basic photography course that I've been doing as part of the blog as well. If you go to robnunphoto.com and look on the right hand side of the menu underneath the big picture, you'll see a little thing that says the course, and the idea is it takes you through from buying a camera through to basic editing in Photoshop. And I've been playing around with blend modes in Elements and Photoshop. And if you do use Photoshop or Elements, I'd say next time you apply a levels adjustment or a curves adjustment or a contrast adjustment, any of that, instead of just using normal or luminescence, have a go with soft light or hard light and see what it does, because I've been really pleased with how it can saturate the colours to give you sort of a lot more feeling of sort of texture and richness to the photograph. So that's really cool, and I did a post about that, and I did a post about using layer masks as well. So the power and beauty of programs like Elements and Photoshop is you can not only do global adjustments to the entire image, you know, with levels and contrast and curves, that sort of thing, and change the colours, but you can change specific bits of the image as well. And one of the easiest ways of doing this is by using layer masks, which are literally you put an adjustment layer onto an image, say to increase the contrast with a levels adjustment, and then you can paint with the paintbrush tool onto that layer mask, and it'll hide or reveal parts of the adjustment. So they're real powerful things to use. I was a bit lazy when I was doing the layer mask ones. If you look carefully, you don't have to look that carefully actually. If you look at the pictures of the destroyers, they had some yachts in front of them, and because I was a bit tired when I was doing that post, I couldn't be bothered to avoid the masks as they were coming up through the superstructures of the destroyer. So if you can see where the masks start dark, then go light where they're in front of the destroyer. So when you do your pictures, you know, take a bit more time, unlike me, as I did for that. Right, main feature for today. What I wanted to talk about was related to the couple of photo walks I've done in the last couple of weeks, which was getting great light outside. We're talking about here, which is really taking photographs during the golden hours, sometimes as they're referred to, which is around dawn and very early morning, and around dusk or late in the evening. And why this is really good. It's really bad because you've got to get really early if you're taking them at dawn. But you know, why is it important to take pictures at that time of day? The main reason is the quality of the light. When the sun's really low on the horizon or below the horizon at dawn or dusk, the light obviously in the sky is a lot dimmer, and so the difference between the colour of the sky, the brightness of the sky and the brightness of the land is a lot smaller. So what we would call the dynamic range of the scene in front of you, if you're taking a landscape, is a lot more compressed. And this is really important because our cameras, our digital cameras or film cameras, can only absorb so much dynamic range. And this is why if you take a traditional landscape picture in the middle of the day on a sunny day, you'll find that you can either get the land or the sea nicely exposed and the sky will be too bright, or the sky can be nice and blue with white fluffy clouds but the ground will be too dark. Whereas around dawn or dusk, that difference in brightness is a lot less, so you can encompass that whole brightness range and colour range in one shot. So that's really important. The other thing is the temperature of the light as well. You tend to find at dawn, I mean, it depends what the weather conditions were like the night before, but you can get like it's a cooler finish. But you can also, depending on the weather, get a warmer sort of orangey glow, which traditionally we associate with sunset shots. So now, as the sun drops below the horizon at night and disappears, everything takes on a lovely tone. You can get these fantastic images of whatever you like. I know, in particular with myself, I mean, I've taken some okay sunset shots, but one of the nicest things you can do when the sun's dropping down really low is to turn around away from the sun and take pictures of other things, because they take on this lovely glow. I mean, a couple of months ago I got this great capture of a tree that was caught in this orange glow from the sun, and it almost looked like the tree was on fire. It was really, really beautiful. Other advantages to taking pictures really early in the morning is the fact that there's nobody else around. So you don't have to feel uncomfortable or embarrassed when you whip out your camera to take pictures of things, because there's nobody to watch you apart from the odd dog watcher. And the other thing is people don't get in the way, which is great. It's a nice, calm and quiet environment that early in the morning. There's very few distractions like car noise and things. That's really nice. Water as well, whether it be the sea or lakes or rivers or moats, tends to be really calm as well, really flat. You can get fantastic reflection shots really, really early in the morning, because the wind hasn't had a chance to whip up any waves and ripples as well. One thing I really like about early in the morning and late at night is the shadows. Because the sun's really low, it's shining like across, it's shining across the landscape, which means that where normally things would be lit from above, like trees or boats or anything, and you get like a fairly small shadow, when the sun's really low you get these fantastic big shadows that leap out across the landscape and really give the feeling of depth to your pictures, making them three-dimensional, because you have proper really bright sides and dark sides. If you look at one of my pictures on my Flickr photo stream, I think I called it Wolf Mark 2, which is it's just a simple, almost abstract picture of a tree, a section of a tree with the bark. But because the sun was coming in from the side, it was sort of a side-lit picture. The right-hand side of the bark is completely black. I've emphasised that a little bit in post-processing, but total shadow. And because you have these wonderful shadows playing across the texture of the bark, that really brings out the texture of anything as well. So that's really cool. Having the sun low in the sky also gives you the opportunity to do front-lit and backlit photography. What that means is, if you want to take a picture of, say, a silhouette, I sort of had to go with the pictures of destroyers at dawn, where you have the sun very, very low behind a subject. You can get images where you can then make beautiful silhouettes, or really, really black silhouettes, so that can look really good. Or you can do the opposite, where you turn around and the sun is behind you shining onto something, so the subject is front lit, so then you can get fantastically warm colours playing across your subject, all because of the softness and the tone of the light. So early in the morning or late at night, not only can you get great traditional landscape shots, because you can get the lovely blues or golds and reds of the skies and that colour shining across the landscape, but it's great to go in close for your details as well. So when you're doing your, not really macro, but when you're doing like no sky landscapes, where you're just taking a picture of, say, I took a picture of there was one particular image where I took a picture of a boat in the sea, and that the sea was really flat, and there was this nice reflection, and the soft light, where normally it would blow out the colours and make them look a little bit washed out during the day, the red of the boat really came to the fore, and in the reflection of the water. Really great time of day to take photographs first thing in the morning. Hello, goes an ambulance, or last thing at night. And I guess depending on your your sort of personal situation. It depends when you can do it. I know for me, because I've got kids and obviously I'm married and things, the evenings tend to be for the kids and me and my wife, so I can't always get out at sunset, but I know if I can get up really early in the morning and go out before the missus goes to work, or the kids get up and start playing and want breakfast and things like that. Now, one of the keys to taking pictures in, I guess you call them almost extreme lighting conditions that are very different to your normal conditions, is the metering you use. So what we're talking about here is how the camera works out the exposure for the scene. So when you point your camera at a scene, say it's a landscape shot, the camera looks at the scene and it goes, right, okay, what should the ISO, what should the shutter speed, and what should the aperture be to correctly expose it if you're in fully automatic mode? Or if you're in, say, aperture priority mode, the ISO will be fixed, the aperture will fix, and it will vary the shutter speed to get the exposure right. And that's when you really think about that, that's a really complicated decision that your camera's got to make. Because how does it know what should be dark and what should be light? How does it know that the sky should be really, really bright or really, really dark? How does it know how dark that shadow should be? Well, it's got a little computer inside it. And Fujifilm or Nikon or Canon, when they're making the automatic exposure algorithms for our cameras, they put decades of research into producing the result that will give you a nicely exposed image. And one of the ways they do it is that they have a certain percentage of grey that they want in the picture. And they know that if they get a certain percentage of grey in the picture, that will probably give you an averagely exposed image. But this only really works in average situations, not in extremes, so like at dusk, dawn, or really, really bright or really, really dark shots. So it's important as photographers that we understand metering and how we can have some artistic control over it as well. So, we understand that when there's an image with some really black shadows, or a dark foreground, say, and a bright subject, we need to understand that when the camera sees something like that that's really, really dark, what it will do is it will attempt to brighten those dark things up. The majority of the picture is dark, and it will make the subject, say, which is smaller, it will make that overexposed. So we need to compensate for that, and the way we do this is through metering. So on your camera you'll have a setting somewhere in the menus, or maybe on one of the buttons, that will let you change the metering mode or the photometry mode of your camera. And it tends to be things like, they call it multi-matrix or evaluative matrix. And with that, the camera then will look at the scene, and then it will look into its database, and it will try and work out the correct exposure. This is the easiest setting to use, and then it will come up with the correct shutter speed, etc., to get it right. A simpler version of this is average, or sometimes they call it average spot-centered metering. And what it will then do is it will look at the whole scene, and maybe with a little bit more emphasis on the middle. So if you're taking a landscape, it'll look at the sky and the ground, and sort of give a little bit more importance to the middle, and then work out the exposure there. Now, the drawbacks to those two particular methods are the extremes. So one of the easiest examples to imagine is, say, you're taking a picture of a field of snow with someone standing in the snow, and you want to take a picture. Now, when the camera sees that, it will see all this white, and it will go, whoa, this picture's way too overexposed, it's too bright, and so it'll reduce the exposure. But then what happens is the white snow will then turn grey, because the camera wants to darken it down, and your person, say their face, will get blown out. They get too bright. So that's bad. So one of the ways we can control this is by using things called spot metering on our camera. And what we can do with spot metering, if we select that, is normally on the camera in the middle, and the little focus ring or brackets in the middle. If you set spot metering, when you get your subject in the middle of that, and then press your shutter halfway down, the camera will then lock the exposure settings for that particular subject. And so it won't care about the rest of the scene, it won't care about that snow, or a similar situation maybe say on a beach with bright sand, or at dawn, with a dark foreground and a bright sky, or at sunset. So you can really tell the camera, this is the bit of the scene that I want correctly exposed. Can you please just look at that bit and then tell me the correct shutter speed to use? And so that gives us a lot more control. Now you can use spot metering like that, where you use focus lock, where you look at something, you press the button down, the camera locks the focus and locks the exposure. But there may be situations where you need to recompose, and that recomposing the scene may mean that your subject then goes out of focus. So one of the ways that you can control this is, instead of using one of the automatic exposure modes like automatic, program, aperture priority or shutter priority, is go to manual. And all you do with manual simply is you aim the centre of your camera at your subject that you want correctly exposed, take the shutter speed and aperture setting off that particular reading, recompose, but because you're in manual mode, the camera isn't going to change any of the settings, so it'll automatically, if you're using autofocus, then focus for the rest of the scene. So that's a way you can control it. Now the way I tend to work when I'm in extreme conditions like dawns or dusks, or very dark or very bright areas, is I swap between the two, between spot photometry and area or average photometry. So I'll take a picture, say of that tree shot with the bark. I'll use spot photometry, and I'll maybe take a picture using spot metering off like the dark bit of the bark and then the light bit of the bark, and then maybe switch to average as well, just to see what comes out best. One of the ways that you can check that you're not damaging your pictures but taking them in a wrong way, whereby you're blowing out the highlights, is if you go into the camera's review mode, you'll often find a function where you can turn on the blinkies, which is where you look at the histogram. And what you don't want is for the whites to blow out, and by looking at the blinkies you can see where whites are blowing out, so you're losing all the detail and it's turning to white, because you can't recover that in post-processing. And in spot metering, it's really easy to blow out light areas of the picture if you're spot metering off a dark area. So just watch out for that. Another option you've got, actually, when you're taking pictures at sunset or dawn or extreme conditions, is to look at the pre-programmed modes on your camera. You may well find that there's a sunset mode or a beach mode, and in that mode the camera will know that you're in a situation where the sky and the ground are closer together in terms of dynamic range. It will know that not to compensate for a bright beach by darkening it down. So you could have a play around with that. I don't really use that, but it's there as a quick option. Another thing you can play around with as well, when the light is dim, say when the sun's below the horizon at sunset or sunrise, is using fill flash. So if you were, say, taking a picture of a landscape and there was you were taking a picture of a rock at the front, and you were a bit concerned that the rock's going to be very underexposed, so too dark, because the rest of the image is too dark, one of the things you could do is use fill flash. So turn your flash setting to forced and take a picture and try it that way. Always consider your depth of field and your shutter speed, so your aperture and your shutter settings, as to how they could affect the image as well. So at dawn and dusk you've got this great opportunity, because the light's a lot softer and there's a lot less brightness in the sky. If you crank down the aperture to a really small aperture, so f13.5, f13.6 and above, you can then go to really long shutter speeds if you're using a tripod. And think about if you're taking pictures of the sea or water or waterfalls and things like that, how that will then give you that soft look. But obviously you've got to think about camera shake, so things like using a tripod. So my sort of recommendation would be, get out early in the morning, get out late at night. Think about how the photometry or metering mode of your camera is really the fourth control. You've got aperture, you can change the aperture, you can change the shutter speed, you can change the ISO, but then think about changing the metering for a particular scene as well, to see if you can get the most out of it. And the beauty of digital is that you can take as many pictures as you want, because you just throw away the rubbish ones. Right, I didn't get that many questions again this week, but Peggy had a great question about HDR images and photomatics, and how she wasn't sure how to use the software, and we had a sort of a little email conversation back and forth to start off with about how to do it. But then I thought, oh, this is a bit complicated, so I actually did, as part of the course, there's a whole long post about using photomatics by HDRsoft to produce HDR images. So if you've got questions about HDR and everything from taking the images to start off with to through processing them with photomatics, there's a big long post that you can work through. And please, if you've got any questions about stuff like that or anything photography related or kit, send me an email, and I'll try and reply to the email personally as well. But if it's something that I think, hey, everybody else could really benefit from this, I'll write a post about it on the blog. Right, recommendations for this week. My first one is one I think I've probably done before, Jeff Curto's History of Photography. One thing I didn't mention at the beginning was all the links that I talk about for the posts within the site and podcasts and websites. I put them in the show notes at www.robnunphoto.com, so just look for the show notes for episode 8, which will either be under the podcast menu at the top of the screen, or they'll be in the sort of home page for the next few days. So don't worry about writing down the URLs, but you can also search on Google, obviously. And Jeff Curto's History of Photography is a great podcast anyway, because he talks about different photographers and their styles and how they've influenced photography through the ages. But the latest one that's come down from the History of Photography is actually, and I knew he was a lecturer at a university in America, but what he actually does is he puts the lectures into his podcast. So I thought, well, that's cool. So it's like you're sitting in on a proper photography degree course about the history of photography. So that's cool. But also, if you go to his site, and I put the link in the show notes, what he does is the whole curriculum for the course is there. So you've got all your notes for the lectures, the links to course books you can buy, links to all the websites that support it. You can download all the assignments all the students are meant to be doing. And I thought, God, what a brilliant resource! If you want to learn about the history of photography, you can actually almost take part in a whole year's, I think it's, I don't know if it's a year, I guess it's a year's course with at American University with Jeff Curto as your professor. And I thought, brilliant. The podcast, the first one, is a bit long. It's about 2 hours long, because it's all about introducing the students to himself and how podcasts work, RSS feeds and things like that. So it does go on a bit. But if you've got the time and you fancy learning about the history of photography, I know I'm going to be listening avidly to this and maybe taking part. And he also has forums that you can go on and discuss things with the students that are there right now in America, learning about the history of photography at I can't remember the university name, but it's all there at Jeff Curto's site. So yeah, really, really cool. Our recommended site for this week is Peggy's Kayak Paddle Tales. As I said before, Peggy has sent me some emails with questions about HDR software, and I went and had a look at her site, and I tell you what, her site is http //paddletales paddletales.blogspot.com, or just search for Peggy's Kayak Paddle Tales in Google. And she's the most brilliant bird photographer. What it is, she lives, I think, near or in Madison County in Florida, in the United States, and she takes a kayak and paddles up and down I think it's called the Wasisa River. And the amount of different birds, egrets and ducks, all these wonderfully coloured avian species are right there. But because she's really low on the water, she gets all these beautiful candid shots of birds and these brilliant angles and perspectives of birds in their natural habitat, eating, fighting. Some of the flying shots where the birds are flying low across the water are just absolutely beautiful. So if you want to see some really nice, bird photography in general, go over to Kayak Paddle Tales and you'll be really impressed. I was blown away when I looked at them. I thought, wow, these pictures, they're crystal sharp and the composition is great. Can't recommend it enough. Our recommended Flickr photo stream this week is a chap called Damien Franco, and you may remember his name from last week where we recommended his website, which is yourphototips.com. But if you go to flickr.com/people/Damien Franco, that's DAMIENFRANCO, and become a contact so that you'll see his new work as he uploads it. He's got some really nice, simple photography. Not simple as in beginner, but as in each photograph has a feeling and a sort of theme. It's a bit hard to describe really, but serene and just natural photography in nice light, and I love looking at his photographs. They're really, really nice. So go over there and have a look at those. No recommended Flickr group this week, because I thought I'd do a recommended DeviantArt collection. So if any of you guys don't know about DeviantArt, it's a bit like Flickr, but for not just photographers. It has photographers, graphic artists, painters, sculptures, loads of stuff on it at deviantart.com, and people create these collections of their favourites really, and there's one that's called Stunning Nature Photography. It's got a huge long URL, so I'll put it in the show notes. But there's these fantastic landscape shots. You know, if you're into your landscape photography, you can look at these pictures and really think, you know, how did they do that? How did they get that beautiful water effect? How did they get the sky that colour? You know, thinking about. Funnily enough, lots of these pictures would have been taken sort of before dawn and after sunset to get these beautiful, beautiful images. So check the show notes out and be inspired by the pictures you'll see on those links. We've still got the technique challenges running at the moment, and people new to the podcast, the technique challenges are open challenges on the Flickr group. So the idea is that they'll take a photographic technique, and the idea is you take sort of up to 3 pictures and post them on the thread, and the whole idea behind it is getting you out and practicing and trying something new. And there's no time limit to these, so you know, you might see one and then get an idea for that in 6 months' time and post it there. And the ones we've got running at the moment are the no sky technique challenge. So the idea is to take a landscape shot, or any type of shot really where there's no sky in it, so you're moving away from the traditional sort of line of thirds landscape idea. And there's also the fill the frame technique challenge, and the idea of the fill the frame challenge is to encourage us to get closer to our subjects. One of the mistakes we make as beginner photographers is we tend to hang back too often and use the wide angle too often on our lenses, and sometimes it's not obvious what the subject of our picture is. So if we say, right, on purpose I'm going to get really, really close to this rock or this car or this person or this object and fill the frame with it, then you know, go for it and take part of that challenge. I'm going to post a new one this week as well, and the challenge will be a dusk or dawn shot with the sun below the horizon. Now I understand this can be really tricky because we can't all get out, you know, really, really early in the morning or late at night. So again, this will be one that can run for as long as we like, but the idea is to get up before the sun rises or after, or go out after the sun has set, and just try and take any sort of shot. It could be a landscape, it could be a, you know, a no sky landscape shot, it could be anything, but just explore the possibilities that this beautiful light and these fantastic shadows and these great colours can give you in the golden hours around dusk and dawn. Our August photo assignment, which I have to say I've been a bit naughty and haven't done anything for yet, was suggested by Weejammer, which is to take a picture from a mouse's perspective, whatever that means to you. Maybe from down low, well, obviously from down low, but maybe, you know, thinking about the things that a mouse might come across during his or her day. I don't know. I'm going to take some today, I think. Remember, you can, if you've got some photographs that you're not sure about where to go next in terms of digital editing, feel free to email them to me at scalespeeder@gmail.com, and I'll, you know, do a simple walkthrough on them and post that on the site as well to help everybody else. Any questions or comments, you can post them on the site in the comments form, or you can go to our Flickr group and start a new thread or respond there, or you can email me directly at scalespeeder@gmail.com. Please submit your pictures to the Flickr forum, take part in the challenges and the assignments. If you find the podcast useful, one of the great things you can do to help it out is, if you're an iTunes subscriber, in iTunes, go to the iTunes store and search for SCL, and then go to the podcast section, and then write a little review about it, saying how great it is, or how not great it is, depending on how you're feeling at the time. But that's really cool, that, because it helps us sort of to jump up the chart, so we can get more people involved in the podcast and the Flickr group, and the challenges, and it just becomes even more fun with lots and lots of people. Thanks to Everyday Jones, the group who do the music for the intro and the outro, and you can find their music over at www.podsafeaudio.com. Thank you very much for downloading and listening to the podcast. I really appreciate it, and thanks for everybody for commenting on the site and taking part in the forum. It's really great that we can get together and sort of improve our photography. Thanks for listening again, and I'll see you on Flickr.